Have you ever thought what was the political situation of the Philippines before there was a Philippines? I mean, before our land got the name Philippines and before Europeans touched our land, have you imagined the politics that it had? During the pre-colonial period, the Datu was the head of the community. Just like a kingdom, there should be a king, so was the community or the barangay, there should be a Datu. Just like in a kingdom, an individual will not be a king if he has no proof of bravery in defending his kingdom and in protecting his people, unless he was a son of a king. So was the Datu. In a community, people look for someone who can defend them from intruders, who show malasakit for their welfare. I remember the story in the book of Judges, if you are familiar with the history of Israel, how God delivered them from their enemies, but they choose to stay in the land with other communities who were worshippers of Baal, not true God. And later on, these Baal worshippers troubled them. As in, they took their animals, their harvest, that they need to hide their food so that it won't be seen by these Baal worshipper people. Until there were some men from Israel who fought against these Baal worshippers. One of them was Othniel. Then there was Ehud after Othniel. Next was Shamgar, then Deborah. And by the way, Deborah's leadership proves that even the Almighty God treat male and female equally. There was no gender discrimination, that even a woman can be a leader. Then after her were Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. They won't become their leader or a Datu in Filipino version if there was no manifestation of their valor. And of course, they have that profound courage because God was with them. If you belong to Christianism and doesn't know the stories of these people, you miss more than half of your life, so you better read the source of your religious belief. Just like them, the people in our land during the pre-colonial period look for somebody among them to lead the community. If you were alive during those times and you were like Gideon or Deborah and others who were able to subdue the enemies, you will be the Datu. The community will give you the highest reverence because they believe that you were a man from God. You have the power to subdue the enemies because God was with you. In gratitude, when farmers get abundant harvest, they will give you some of it as a tribute. And they were willing to serve you, to till your land for free. Meaning, they won't ask for payment for their labor because it was a token of their gratitude from protecting them, from allowing them to live peacefully. In times that there are disputes among them, you as a Datu had the privilege to mediate them. They will listen to you because they respect you so much. So, you were able to solve the case. You can be their judge, and your judgment will be respected. When you command, they will obey because they trust your action. They will go with you in wars, in voyage, in fishing, and even in building houses. With that trust and respect given to the Datu by the people, it gave the Datu the authority to host in ceremonies such as wedding and funeral. What about if the Datu became abusive of these privileges? That is the time that the people will start to turn their back and search for a new leader. In times that there was no Datu, the Babaylan became the head of the community. Babaylan are the spiritual leaders in the community. Some of the Babaylan were just spiritual leaders and not warriors. But the community still gave tribute and free services because they believed that through the prayers or rituals done by the Babaylan, God gave them a bountiful harvest and peace in the land. During those times, people have the following values. They valued personal ownership. They call the tiller the master, and he is socially recognized. Both chiefs and ordinary people were entitled to rights of possession, especially in the matter of dwelling units and personal effects. Individual possession was respected to the extent that no one was able to usurp something claimed as belonging to another. Stealing within the settlement is the most serious offense. There is actually no communalism, but what exists is bayanihan. For example, during the celebration of end of farm work, they brought food and drinks to enjoy by everyone. When they borrow, for instance, a capital for sowing season, they return it twice as a token of gratitude. The situation eventually changed during the Spanish colonization. The datus magic disappeared upon the arrival of the Friar power. These are the changes that occurred during the Spanish era. During the Spanish era, there was a royal land grants. I remember one of the employees in the Department of Agrarian Reform told me that there were 3S who got hectares of land in the Philippines. These were sundalo, simbahan, and sipsip, or those Indios like Capitan Tiago. Sundalo were the Spaniards who fought in colonizing the land. But some of them returned to Spain after the wars, and they donated their land to religious orders while others sold their land. There are native elites who were also able to buy land, and they got land title, so they had claims on lands. They were now the masters. Those who till it became the share tenants. The elites who were the masters of the land were the one who decide about the amount of sharing or interest in terms of loan. But in 1640, there was a Spanish law prohibiting loans in excess of 5 Spanish pesos. If you borrow and the amount you're going to pay exceed in 5 Spanish pesos, you will be imprisoned. In our time today, there is a policy for the government employees that they should not apply for loan if their take-home pay will be less than 4 or 5,000 pesos. Why? Because it denotes that they have no more funds to pay their debts. What was really left is for their daily basic needs. So, it's time to cut costs. Since the owner of the land has the full rights to claim the produce of the land, while the laborers were dependent on the share that they will allot, they provide foods and drinks to the laborers. Unlike before, when everyone works for everybody because there was the spirit of bayanihan, everybody brought food and drinks to enjoy by everyone. So why is the change? Because laborers have no more sufficient supply to share. Their income was just enough for the household consumption, unlike before when they enjoyed the bounty of every harvest. During harvest time, the farmers gave a portion of their share for the government, formerly to the datu, and they call it a tribute. Now it is a tax. What's the difference? A tribute was given out of gratitude. A tax was given out of obligation. As a Catholic or a Christian, when you offer cash for God's ministry, God looks in the heart of the giver, meaning you should see your offering as a tribute and not as a tax. Got it? During the pre-colonial period, when a person borrows something, for example, isang gantang na bigas, it will be returned on the exact day that the borrower promised with additional 1 gantang na bigas. If it delays, it will be returned with additional 2 gantang na bigas. And that was because of the person's token of gratitude, aside from his or her word of honor, because he or she was given a favor at the most needed time. Now, in the Spanish time, these good values change. Maybe because the borrower has no way to get better in life. So, if he pays with additional, it will just make his family starve. So, the interest of what was borrowed becomes a forced action. That's why it was seen as a usury or avarice. because you already know that the person who borrowed was poor, who lacks in life, and yet you were still asking for more than what he borrowed. You were already depriving him of a decent life. Unlike before, when everybody has enough, they were happy to help their neighbors in sowing and reaping. I'll help you, you help me too. Everyone is happy. But during the Spanish time, when 80% of the land was owned by only 20% of the privileged population, and only the 20% of the land were shared by the 80% of the population, the people were no longer willing to give their time in tilling other people's land without a payment, especially if that land belongs to someone who had the full capacity to pay. So, if you were the landowner and you tell your worker to work 12 hours but you were going to pay him the same amount you pay for his 8-hour work, that was excessive and oppressing. So, the previous values originated from the trust, respect, and gratitude which the people had for the datu in the belief that he was a man of God. Later on, when the Catholicism was introduced in the land and the role of the datu was replaced by the elites and the friars, the good values gradually disappeared. Peasants observed that if they are cooperative in the practice of Catholicism, like attending Mass and some rituals, processions for instance, the friar power was controlled. Of course, we knew that the friar has no heavenly power, but that was what they tried to make the people believe. And they need rituals so that the power will be effective. It implies that the power of the friars can be controlled by the people who join these rituals. Because the magic of the datu was no longer effective, to ensure that the harvest will be bountiful, the peasants used Palm Sunday leaves, or the palaspas, or pieces of scrapes of saintly statues, and other Catholic artifacts obtained during procession or some ritual. Priests are not needed in performing the offering because the activity is individualized and a personal secret. In some parts of the land, sacrifices were offered to the diwata for good fortune or harvest. Some use anting-anting in their belief of attracting good fortune. During the friar's time, diwata was replaced by saints or Mama Mary as she was called, but the former practice on rituals were not edited. In case you are one of them, I wish you take time to reflect on these things, whether those practices are really glorifying the true God of creation or glorifying another God. Because so far, what I knew from the book of Deuteronomy, the prophet of God said, "You must not worship the Lord your God the way the other nations worship their gods. For they perform for their gods every detestable act that the Lord hates." Because of the changes in agrarian relations, peasants' autonomy was born. They were no longer dependent on the datu. Their faith was now based on their performance or participation in rituals. The social, culture, political, and economic affairs was a metaphor of the cockfight, a gamble introduced by the Spaniards. If cockfighting is a gamble or a sugal, life is also a sugal. I'm not familiar with the terminology used in cockfighting, but my reference mentioned about a word tahur, which is a Spanish for cheating. And as life was a gamble, so there is also cheating. The natives' outlook about destiny, fortune, and success had changed. For example, those who believe in guhit ng palad. Is anyone among you also believe that what happened, what is happening, and what will happen in your life depends on the lines of your palm? Well, the natives who believe in that came to believe that they need to change the lines on their palm to change their destiny. At first, I thought they finally realized that destiny, fortune, and success are achievable for those who literally pray and works for it. But no, rather, they do the thing called sibit, that is slicing the part of the palm with the quote-unquote bad luck lines, ouch, so that its direction will change. It means they still believe and depended their faith in guhit ng palad. But what is the belief of today's Christians when it comes to destiny or success? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Even what we would normally call chance or fate is under God's control. It was said in the book of Proverbs, "The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord." In 1701, the provincial governor were charged with penalizing gamblers, but the friars denounced it. Why? Because the governors were the ones who secretly give full license and permission for gambling in consideration for money which they receive every month. Question: does it mean the money from gambling went to church? Maybe yes, but it should not be, because God will not allow to use bad money in His ministry. Or maybe no, because the money was not given to the church after all, but to the friars. On the other hand, there are also good things that the Spanish had contributed to the optimism of the people. One of these is about the children with special disabilities or with special needs, whom was formerly considered as bad luck. During the Spanish period, there were no children with special needs in the Philippines because they were being killed during infancy, according to some studies. So, to discourage infanticide, and because it is against Catholicism, the Iberian colonizers who value physical features convinced the natives that children with special needs are good luck. That's why even today, those families who have children with special needs and happens to become rich due to a family member who works abroad or hardworking, attributed the luck or success to the CSN or children with special need in the family. Therefore, those which previously considered as bad luck has now converted into good luck. In the same way, subjugation could be put to advantage depending on how well one played the social game. Just like negotiation in spirit world was also attainable by selling one's soul to the devil, which people deduced from wealth accumulated from export agriculture. Meaning, the reason of becoming rich was not really from export agriculture, but of some illegal business or dirty works. When you choose to do a thing which may harm others' lives for the sake of wealth, that is selling your soul to the devil. And when you have sold your soul to the devil, that is subjugation or defeat, which the people considered as an advantage because somehow it made them rich. However, there were still others who believed that fortune or success can be achieved in a safe way, and it was here where pamahiin or superstition began. This was obtaining success or good fortune without harming others. Example, sweeping dirt out of one's house. It means you're going to sweep the dirt inside your house, starting at the door, going inside. You will need a dustpan to do that. But for me, I think it is more about ethics, because when you're sweeping the dirt outward, you're spreading the tiny dirt particles in the air that might be blown by the wind to your neighbors. Removing of ants' hill. They thought it was inhabited by Nunu, so they would not touch it. Scientifically, because the truth is, it was inhabited by termites, if you will just remove it, the termites might relocate, and worse, it could be inside your house. The number of steps in staircase are counted in sets of 3, oro, plata, mata. The last step should not end in mata, which means bad luck. Well, that was from Spanish and Chinese combination superstitious belief. The importance of coins in gambling was linked to the quality of communicating in the spirit world. For example, Santo Niños were garbed in finery and given money to bring good luck to its owner. Have you seen Santo Niño with a purse? That's it. During house construction, coins were buried at corner posts and beneath the main entrance to appease unseen spirits who, because of the offering, are expected to bestow luck to the homeowner. Sharing one's luck augments future chances of victory. So, if you give balato after winning in the lotto, you will be lucky again. The willingness to bet repeatedly and part with money can be a sign of trust in one's friendly relations with certain preternatural beings who are expected to reciprocate in the form of financial windfalls. But who were these preternatural beings? Are they gods? Certainly they're not, because they are many. Are they angels? Maybe they were. But what is the implication of this superstitious belief which was handed to the people by the colonizers? The people were taught to trust in other gods and not to the true one. They were taught to forget the true God. But the book of Proverbs reminds Christians to trust in the Lord with all their heart and lean not on their own understanding. In all their ways, submit to Him, and He will make their paths straight. So, are you still under the power of the colonizers? Fatalism, with its unchangeable principles, nonetheless makes room for human cunning and manipulation in order to avoid the snares of fate. Those lands that the elites had usurped, as well as the uncultivated land parcels belonging to the public domain, which they had claimed as their personal property, were sold due to surplus and because of their inability to take advantage of the commercial revolution. These sold-off lands were initially acquired by Spanish civilians, then subsequently resold to the religious states. To raise revenue for the religious coffers, the states began to lease land in the 1590s to sharecroppers called inquilinos, first to ethnic Chinese, but later in the 17th century, these Chinese moved on to trade, so they were replaced by Indios on the land. We knew that agricultural production varies from year to year. The monastic orders made sure they did not suffer from fluctuations in farm yield by stipulating the rent in fixed monetary terms but paid for in kind, according to the price of rice prevailing during harvest time. Example, the fixed rental is 1,000 pesos per cropping. The first cropping, the price of one sack of palay is 250 pesos. The farmer will give 4 sacks of palay. On the second cropping, the price of one sack of palay is 200. The farmer will give 5 sacks of palay. Why 5 sacks? To make up for the first cropping payment. For Indios, to be employed in friar power was to bask in the magic and protection of the Hispanic shamans, as though the monastic estates were a reincarnation of the barangay under the leadership of men of prowess. To be within the penumbra of Spanish magical men also meant added protection from colonial state exactions, because the religious shielded their wards from tribute collection and had them exempted from the harsh corvée labor of timber cutting, log hauling, and shipbuilding. Attachment to the monastic estates was also a source of pride and privilege, as the clerics provided loans and cash advances and introduced innovations in farm technology. But not all who works in the friar land were in the good hands. There were natives who could not endure conditions in the friar states, particularly the landless, who were supposed to have been hired and paid a nominal wage but were not. They rebelled by fleeing to the hinterland beyond the reach of the colonial state, there to pursue their own distinctive anti-colonial style of life. They were called vagabundos. Outside the Tagalog region and its ecclesiastical states, friar dominance and command over local economies were felt in a different manner. The friars had taken over the functions of both datu and babaylan. Natives began to doubt the legitimacy of clerical surplus instruction, especially as there was hardly any tangible gift-giving on the part of the friar. In 1740s, the Chinese mestizos dominated domestic trade. They supplied Manila with foodstuffs and exportable products obtained from the provinces. Mestizos buy only in the years when they calculate that they must make profit from their peripatetic capital despite the institutional difficulties in equilibrating supply and demand in Manila market in 1820s. Visayas, particularly Panay Island, Mulo, and Haro in Iloilo, became site of vibrant native textile industry thrived under mestizo traders. Land acquisition became an attractive form of investment and gamble. Actually, even today. Monastic states were leased to mestizos that exceed the average of 1.4 hectares, which was rented by the Indios. In the 19th century, they sustained their lease-holding activity despite the cumbersome 3-year contracts from the 1840s to 1890s. In turn, they subdivided the leased property and entered into share tenancy or kasama contracts with Indio peasants. They took over the state's role of providing cash advances to tenants. Rice and sugarcane were planted on many such inquilino lands. Meaning, because Chinese became very successful in trades and monastic estates were vast, some monastic estates were leased to the Chinese mestizos. Then, they took a tenant or kasama. The kasama was the one who do the farm work. From the produce, the mestizo will pay the fixed annual rent to the religious landowners. And the remaining part, half of it will be given to the kasama. In the end, still realize a profit. Even in our present time, there were still some leases who practice this old system of subleasing. But this is not allowed by the law. So, those involved just keep it secret because they knew it is illegal. Some leases also experience loss in this system. In the same way, a number of mestizos leases could not recover from their mounting debts and lost the gamble. What I mean is, subleasing is like a gamble because you're taking the risk. You don't know if you will obtain profit or loss. So to ensure that they will win, they sought to extract full advantage from the subletting arrangement by requiring the kasama, treated as production partner, to provide seedlings, the carabao, and working implements. If he had no work animals or tools, the kasama was charged high fees for their use. For example, if you are the kasama, you became a production partner. Being a production partner, you need to provide yourself the seedlings, the carabao, and other working implements. Otherwise, you will be charged of high fees if the tenant or your other production partner will be the one to provide. Very clever, isn't it? Another agricultural setup was called sanglang bili or pacto de retroventa. The Indio cultivator who pawned his property for a determinate time period, often to raise money for cockfighting and gambling, was temporarily converted as a sharecropper. If you are a sharecropper, you can still work on your farm, but you have no rights to claim all its produce until you redeem your pawned property. So what happens if you can't redeem the land? Due to his inability to redeem the land, the moneylender became full owner of the property for a third or half of its market value, while the peasant became a full-fledged contractual sharecropper. sharecroppers remained on the land owned by mestizos, honoring their debts, cultivating the land, and acquiring more debts. Sharecropping is called in Ilonggo agsa system. In Hokkien word, it is aksa, which in English word is shit. Whatever it means, that's what it means. That's life game. Mapapamura ka na lang if you end up being in the position of the sharecropper. But you know, being in debt is unbiblical. St. Paul said to the Romans, "Owe no one." The prevalence of the kasamahan contract prompted Captain General Jose Vasco y Vargas to outlaw it in 1784. But by granting the elderly and the infirm right to contract a kasama, evasion of Vasco's prohibitory edict was easy. The colonial state also did not have the means to enforce the law. That was the situation in the country that was also observed by Dr. Jose Rizal. Again, the social, culture, political, and economic affairs was a metaphor of the cockfight. Cockfight is gambling, and in gambling, there is cheating. But before the Spanish colonization, the people in the land were living sufficiently and peacefully.